Once you get into the NFL season, I have a very specific way that I try to handle the day by day of a week in between game to game. Assume that the Bengals play on a Sunday. What do you use Monday for? Monday, well, you react, you sleep on it, you sleep on the result, and then you start to assess blame, good and bad. What went right? What went wrong? How exactly did we get to this point? How did we get to the end result on Sunday? Then on Tuesday, you start to search for solutions. How do we fix what went wrong? How do we turn that into a positive? How do we continue what did go right? How do we continue that into the following week? On Wednesday, you start looking ahead. What does your opponent have? What did they do last week? How do they match up? What's their injury report look like? Because most teams start practicing again on Wednesday. Thursday, you start kind of game planning a little bit. Okay, here's where maybe some of their deficiencies are. Here's where we're strong at. Here's, that's kind of how I view it. And then by Friday comes around, you get fired up. You're ready to go. You can't wait to play more football. And that's how I try to view covering a week-to-week basis in the National Football League. That's kind of my process of like getting from point A to point B throughout the week. Obviously, a little bit difficult this week with the Joe Burrow injury to get past that. And yeah, understandably got hung up on that a little bit. But now we've got to shift our focus to the Bengals and to the Minnesota Vikings coming up on Sunday. Let's start with a look around the National Football League. Hi, hello, and welcome in to episode number 153 of the Ball Don't Lie podcast. My name is Austin Elmore. Thank you for being here and for listening. I'm going to pause right now. I'm going to ask you, if you haven't already, please, if you're listening on Apple, leave a 5-star rating, like the podcast, subscribe to the podcast, comment on it, tell me how much you like it. That helps the podcast grow. It helps it show up in search engines and all sorts of stuff. So please share it, like it, subscribe to it, wherever you may be seeing this podcast, whether that's on YouTube, wherever it might be. Please do that. Let's rewind quickly to week 2 in the National Football League. We didn't get a chance to talk about this earlier this week because I spent the episode talking about Joe Burrow. So what happened? Thursday Night Football, Packers over the Commanders. Green Bay really has emerged as a Super Bowl favorite. They're 2-0. Their defense is dominating. That front seven is dominating. And if Jordan Love continues to make progress, there was the breakout game for Tucker Kraft, their tight end. Green Bay appears to be a legitimate Super Bowl contender. Fun game in Dallas. It was the Cowboys over the Giants, 40-37 in overtime. 14 straight games Dallas has beaten New York. It's kind of hard to believe, and they did it thanks to Dak Prescott going crazy, Brandon Aubrey going crazy. It was a great game for Russell Wilson and not George Pickens, but Malik Neighbors up until the very end for Russ. Highly entertaining game, really fun game there. Bears over the Lions, or Lions over the Bears, I should say, 52-21. I admit I did not see this one coming, but it felt like a bit of a statement for Detroit, kind of reminding everybody who they are and maybe that they don't need no Ben Johnson. Big game for Detroit. It was the Rams over the Titans 33-19 in Nashville. Puka Nacua was wonderful. Devontae Adams had his first big day for the Rams. I'm still very high on the Rams so long as Matthew Stafford stays healthy. Patriots over the Dolphins 33-27. Miami is 0-2. It feels like things could get out of hand rather quickly for Miami. They're about to play on Thursday Night Football. As I'm recording this in Buffalo, that's a tall task. They could be 0-3, and Mike McDaniel could be out the door. Niners over the Saints 26-21. Mac Jones started this game for San Francisco. No Brock Purdy as he recovers from a turf toe injury. Obviously not as severe as Joe Burrow, but Mac Jones played well. New Orleans loses again. It was the Bills over the Jets 30-10. Josh Allen didn't do much through the air, but the Bills did a lot through the ground. Justin Fields has a concussion for the Jets. We'll see if he plays this week. Seahawks over the Steelers 31-17. Aaron Rodgers wasn't great. Pittsburgh special teams unit wasn't great. And also, TJ Watt is on the side of milk cartons all throughout the Midwest. Nobody can find him. It's been like 7 games since TJ Watt registered a sack. Yikes. Ravens over the Browns 41-17. Cleveland did perform well in the run game, holding Derrick Henry to like 6 yards or something ridiculous like that. but they struggled in the pass game. Lamar and company did a great job, 41-17 the final there. Indianapolis 2-0 after a walk-off field goal, 29-28 over Denver in Indianapolis. Danny Dimes, is he the truth? It was the Cardinals over the Panthers 27-22 in Arizona. Eagles beat the Chiefs in the Super Bowl rematch 20-17. Kansas City 0-2. 0-2. Falcons over the Vikings 22-6 on Sunday Night Football. J.J. McCarthy was awful. He now has a sprained ankle. We'll get into that in just a little bit. Buccaneers over the Texans in a highly entertaining Monday Night Football game, 20-19. I love Baker Mayfield. He's so fun to watch. And Chargers over the Raiders, 20-9. So that's the quick recap of week number 2. Let's quickly look ahead to week number 3. So as I said, I'm recording this on Thursday night, the 18th. So the Dolphins-Bills are about to kick off. After that, you've got the Packers at the Browns at 1 o'clock. The Colts at the Titans. So Indianapolis very well could be 3-0 right out of the chute. You've got the Steelers at the Patriots. I think that's a sneaky good game this week. The Rams are at the Eagles. Obviously a really good game, an NFC playoff rematch from a year ago. The Jets are at the Buccaneers. The Buccaneers' offensive line is falling apart, and they just lost Kalijah Cansey, a defensive tackle, one of their starters for the season, due to a torn pec. Injury bug hitting Tampa in a big way. Raiders are in Washington to take on the Commanders. Unclear if Jaden Daniels will play. He's dealing with a sprained knee. Right now, it doesn't look like he will. Falcons and Panthers in Carolina. Texans at Jacksonville. Jags are wearing their throwback uniforms from the late 90s, early 2000s era. They are so sharp. Broncos and Chargers. That's a good game right there. Chargers have been playing well, maybe as good as any team in the NFL. Broncos out of the gates a little bit slow, especially on offense, but their defense is still really, really good. That's the first game in the 4 o'clock window. That's a 4:05. Saints travel up to Seattle to take on the Seahawks at 4:05. It'll be the Cowboys in Chicago to take on the Bears. Cardinals are in San Francisco taking on the Niners in an NFC West matchup. Sunday Night Football will be the Kansas City Chiefs and the New York Giants. Kansas City all-time is 4-11 against the Giants. That is their worst record against any opponent in Kansas City's history. Kind of hard to believe. And then a great standalone Monday Night Football game on Monday. It'll be the Detroit Lions up against the Baltimore Ravens in Baltimore. And then, of course, one more game to be played, the Cincinnati Bengals and the Minnesota Vikings. Let's start with that. Let's start with the injury report for each of these teams. Give me a moment to pull it up because it's not looking good for Cincinnati. Obviously, Joe Burrow is not going to play as he is out for the foreseeable future, but there were a couple of injuries that cropped up this week that we did not expect for Cincinnati. The first one being, first of all, let's start with what we know. Joe Burrow not going to play. Shamar Stewart not going to play. Zach Taylor said that earlier this week. He's got an ankle. He has not practiced either of these 2 days. Dylan Fairchild, the rookie left guard, popped up on the injury report with a shoulder injury, but he's been a full participant in both practices. Looks like he's going to play, barring a setback. The big one was Wednesday at practice, Cam Taylor-Britt left practice early due to a hamstring injury. He was officially listed as limited, and then on Thursday did not participate in practice. Not good for the Bengals. Logan Wilson dealing with an ankle. He was limited on Wednesday's practice. He was a full participant in Thursday's practice. And then DJ Turner, the other starting cornerback opposite of Cam Taylor-Britt, he was totally fine and a full participant in practice Wednesday with no injury designation, but he popped up on the injury report Thursday as limited with a hamstring injury. So, if you're looking at it that way, both starting cornerbacks for the Bengals are dealing with hamstring injuries, which could keep them both out of the game against the Minnesota Vikings, which is a tall task when you consider that a guy by the name of Justin Jefferson exists and he's on the Minnesota sideline. So I think the injuries right now are the big story of this game. Obviously, Burrow is out, so Jake Browning is in. J.J. McCarthy, the rookie quarterback for Minnesota, is dealing with an ankle sprain, so he's being replaced by Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz is going to make history on Sunday. He is going to be the first quarterback in NFL history to start a game for 6 different teams in 6 consecutive years. Kind of hard to believe. Wentz grew up as a Minnesota Vikings fan, so it's especially special for him to be able to do that. We speak very highly of Kevin O'Connell as a coach and as a quarterback guru and a former quarterback himself. I think the expectation is Carson Wentz is a better quarterback and better suited for Minnesota right now than J.J. McCarthy is, especially after the way that McCarthy performed in the first 2 games of the season. But the biggest issue in Minnesota has been their protection. Their protection has not been holding up very well, and they've had multiple injuries on that offensive line, including starting center Ryan Kelly. Kelly, as we speak right now on Thursday, is in concussion protocol. Their starting left tackle normally is Christian Darrisaw. He's recovering from an ACL injury suffered last year. He's missed their first 2 games. The good news for Darrisaw is he's going to return. He was a full participant Wednesday. He had a rest day Thursday, is expected to be a full participant on Friday and be good to go. And that's going to be huge going up against Trey Hendrickson in the Bengals offensive line. Other than that, for Minnesota, they're a little bit banged up. Jeff Okudah, one of their cornerbacks, you might remember as an Ohio State Buckeye, he's dealing with a concussion, but he was a full participant in practice both days this week. Andrew Van Ginkel is dealing with a concussion, one of their great linebackers. He has been limited in practice both these weeks. It does look like they're going to get back Harrison Smith, who's missed the first 2 games of this season. He's their great safety. He's been with Minnesota for a long, long time. He was on the injured list with an illness this week. He's been limited, but it is expected that he will make his debut in the 2025 season on Sunday against the Bengals. Donovan Jackson, their rookie guard, another offensive lineman, guy out of Ohio State, has not been great so far through the first couple of games. He's been limited with a wrist injury on their injury report this week. And we were talking to Kevin Seifert, who covers the Bengals, Kevin Seifert, who covers the Vikings for ESPN. And I asked him, has the Vikings' offensive struggles been about J.J. McCarthy or been about the offensive line? Because Minnesota has invested a lot of money in that offensive line, and they have not performed well, and now they're all injured. And Kevin said more about J.J. McCarthy. So if you take that for what it's worth, Carson Wentz in and of itself should mean that the offense gets a little bit better. Christian Darrisaw comes back means the offense gets a little bit better. And oh, by the way, Justin Jefferson is still out there, and Aaron Jones, their running back, is out, but Jordan Mason, a guy that come over from San Francisco, has gotten 12 carries in each of the last 2 games and is a good pass protector and an explosive running back. Couple that with the fact that the Bengals have 2 starting cornerbacks injured, and you're looking at it thinking, okay, might be a long day for the Bengals defense. And it might be a long day for the Bengals offense as well. On the other side, Brian Flores, one of the most well-respected defensive coordinators in the NFL, shows a lot of different looks, brings a lot of different blitzes, is great with stunts. Minnesota has some offensive linemen or some defensive linemen that have been winning up front for them so far this season. They may have been a little bit uneasy in the secondary with a couple of guys going down and Harrison Smith not being there and Van Ginkel being a little bit banged up, but they're all trending in the right direction is Minnesota. And with Joe Burrow not there and with a Bengals offensive line that struggles, it just is leaning in the direction of a really difficult game for the Bengals, in my opinion. So, to me, in going through it as we do over the course of the week, we've been trying to figure out, okay, what really is this game going to come down to? And it's easy to say the quarterbacks because they're both backup quarterbacks, but it's beyond that. It actually moves on, in my mind, to how exactly or what exactly is the chess match between the defensive coordinators, between Brian Flores in Minnesota and with Al Golden in Cincinnati. So Cincinnati presses a decent amount, and Justin Jefferson, one of the ways to try to combat him is to press him. It's also meant when you press a wide receiver on the outside to give your defensive line a little bit of time to get to the quarterback. So receivers aren't getting free releases. They're not easier and quicker to get open. And if you're bringing blitzes, the quarterback has to hold the ball just an extra second longer, and you can try to force your quarterback into holding on to that ball far too long. That's been a big issue for Minnesota under J.J. McCarthy. He's holding the ball over 3 seconds per drop back, which is the most in the NFL, 3.1 seconds. Carson Wentz in the past has been one of the quickest to get rid of the ball. Since 2018, I think he's top 10 in the NFL in getting rid of the ball quickly. Now, obviously, that's been in Philadelphia and Kansas City and all these Indianapolis and all these other different stops. So you don't know exactly what it looks like with Minnesota. But in order to alleviate the pass rush and the offensive line struggles and the offensive line injuries, Minnesota, I guarantee you, is going to try to do two things: run the football and get the ball out quickly. So, how is Al Golden going to try to counter that? I think is the most interesting part. First and foremost, if you've got Dax Hill and Josh Newton and Marco Wilson as your healthy cornerbacks, it could be a long day against Justin Jefferson. It really could be. And not to mention they've got a good tight end in Hawkinson as well. So to me, the Bengals, well, first and foremost, the Bengals have blitzed hardly at all. Like the lowest rate in the NFL, one of the lowest rates in the NFL. I think we're going to see that change. I think we're going to see more blitzes by the Bengals and try to get Carson Wentz to hold on to that ball while they press on the outside and try to force him to make a mistake. That's what I think is going to happen. More blitzes from Cincinnati in the face of Carson Wentz, make him beat you. That I think is going to be the goal, the Bengals' goal. And on top of that, the defense has to get home. They have to get pressure on them. When they do drop 7 or when they do drop 8, you got to find ways to create pressure against that offensive line, especially if they're banged up. So Trey Hendrickson, to me, is a key part of this game. Trey, through 2 games, leads the NFL in pressures. You got 12, 14 pressures to this point. Trey has to be a game wrecker for Cincinnati. Without Joe Burrow, you look to Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Trey Hendrickson. The rest of those guys that were part of those big contracts, somebody has to step up. And Trey has to be a game wrecker in this game if the Bengals have a chance, especially because Shamar Stewart is not going to be there, and that Vikings offensive line is banged up. On the flip side, how do the Bengals make it work without Joe Burrow on offense? Now, the easy part is you also want to get the ball out quick. You want to. There was a thread this week about why is the Bengals offense different with Jake Browning as opposed to Joe Burrow? And the main point is that Joe has the ability to extend plays, to process, to go deep down the field. So you use more of those quicker or those longer developing, deeper passing concepts. With Jake Browning, you eliminate some of those and try to go quick game, get the ball out of his hand, get him into a rhythm, allow your skill pieces on the outside to win those matchups and keep the chains moving that way. Cincinnati obviously has to run the football. I've talked extensively about that on this podcast this year. Everybody knows that. But how are the defensive coordinators going to defend him? Listen to this number from Jake Browning in that game against Jacksonville on Sunday. He had 8 pass attempts against the blitz. He was 7 for 8, 125 yards, and 2 touchdowns after he took over for Burrow. He threw all 3 of his interceptions against Jacksonville's 4-man pass rush. So that meant Jacksonville wasn't blitzing anybody. They were dropping 7 guys back. That's where Browning threw all 3 of his interceptions. He recorded a league-high 57.7% drop-back success rate against the blitz against Jacksonville. And the Vikings have utilized the blitz 37.3% of dropbacks this season, which is the 6th highest in the National Football League. So if you look to their season last year in 2024, they blitzed 41.8% of the time. That was the most in the NFL by a wide margin. And the Vikings have allowed just 5.1 yards per attempt on those dropbacks this year. So when they blitz quarterbacks in pass pro, they're only allowing 5 yards per completion, which means they're keeping things in front of them. They're tackling well in the open field. That is the 4th fewest in the NFL. So if you're Brian Flores and you say, okay, well, Jake Browning is a lot better against the blitz, and the Bengals' weapons on the outside are really good one-on-one and can beat just about anybody, they don't have a run game that they've proven they can beat me with. Why shouldn't I just drop back 7 or 8 guys in coverage and try to cover Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, force Jake Browning to hold the ball, and see if he'll force the ball into coverage, double coverage, triple coverage, try to fit it into tight zones, try to layer it over linebackers, and see if he'll make mistakes like he did against Jacksonville. I expect Brian Flores to go against what he normally is, which is a guy who blitzes constantly. I expect him to disguise coverages, disguise formations, move post-snap, and drop 7 to 8 defenders on most snaps to try to confuse Jake Browning and force him into making mistakes. I don't think they're going to blitz and try to risk giving up big plays or chunk plays to the Bengals, which means it becomes even more imperative to be able to run the football, bring guys into the box, force Minnesota to run blitzes, and create more opportunities for you to hit chunk plays. So I think we're going to see two defensive coordinators flip who they normally are. Brian Flores blitzes a lot. I expect him to blitz less. Al Golden doesn't blitz hardly at all. I expect him to blitz more. Those two things on each side of the ball, I think, are going to be critical to deciding the outcome of this game. Right now, just because of the Bengals' injuries in the secondary and because of Shamar Stewart being hurt up front, and altogether just how good Brian Flores is as a defensive coordinator, right now I feel like Minnesota wins this game. I think it'll be a close game. I think it'll be a competitive game. I think it'll be a low-scoring game, but I think Minnesota wins the game and puts Cincinnati at 2-1. We did get some updates today about the surgery for Joe Burrow. Ian Rappaport of NFL Network reporting the following about Joe Burrow and his surgery. His surgery is scheduled for Friday, September 19th in Birmingham, Alabama. He is going to be, the surgery is going to be performed by Dr. Norman Waldrop. I'm trying to get this to load right now on my phone. It doesn't want to load. Norman Waldrop, who has done some famous surgeries in the past, including Derrick Henry. He did Derrick Henry's foot surgery. Let's see what else we got here on Norman as it's finally starting to load. Stand by. Here we go. Burrow is set for surgery Friday if the swelling allows. So he still is experiencing swelling in that left foot, and it is possible that the surgery gets moved back a couple of days because of that swelling. It will be Birmingham, Alabama, the Andrews Sports Medicine and Orthopedic Center. Continuing information about this, Dr. Norman Waldrop will do the procedure. He is a foot and ankle specialist who learned from his mentor, Dr. Robert Anderson. Dr. Anderson is the guy the Bengals sent the images to get a second opinion on Burrow's foot. He's also world-renowned as one of the best foot surgeons in the NFL, foot ankle specialists in the world, and all that. And so this guy, Waldrop, learned from Dr. Anderson. He has also performed high-level surgeries on Tua Tagovailoa's ankle and Derrick Henry's foot. So that will be the guy performing the surgery for Joe Burrow. It is scheduled for Friday morning if the swelling allows. So that's the latest on Burrow. They're still saying roughly a 3-month recovery time. We'll see how that goes. Not sure if that's going to end up working out that way or not. Going to be a tough game for the Bengals. I think they can win. I just think that right now, Minnesota has more Jimmies and Joes available to help them, and that will overtake the X's and O's. You know what they say? It's about the Jimmies and the Joes, not the X's and the O's. Well, I think right now, the Bengals don't have their Joe, and Minnesota has enough Jimmies and Joes to overcome the X's and the O's. How about that? That's pretty profound right there, isn't it? All right, thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Ball Don't Lie podcast. We'll be back next week following the game and following week 3 in the National Football League. If you liked what you heard, you can hear me each weekday, noon to 3 on ESPN 1530. I co-host Cincy 360 with Tony Pike. You can also follow me on all social media at Auty Elmore, AUTYELMORE. Thank you so much for listening. And as always, have fun, be safe, go Bucks.